records on defense, and the Tigers are right on top. Alabama has the best resume, the two best wins in the country. Their offense put a 40 spot on maybe the nation's best defense. But now the Tide will have to go without Jalen Waddle, the one weapon in that potent offense for which no one seemed to have an answer. You don't have to tell Ohio State about how fragile a season can be. The Buckeyes weren't even sure if they were going to be able to play. But now that they are, Justin Fields just as brilliant as advertised. And those new receivers, nothing is out of reach. Look, I know anybody can be upset, but this is what separation looks like. The Trinity from the rest of college football. So if it were to stay that way, those top three spots look to be very easy. But the real tough part in this bizarre season for the committee, how do you separate the rest for one last spot?
This is Christmas morning for Big Ten fans.
Wow, the Big Ten is back.
Late October, love football this time of the year.
It was a strange feeling, like looking around saying, anybody just see that?
Into the hands of Mims. They do it again.
Touchdown, Alabama.
You've done it now. Gone against the king. Gone against the crowd.
Noah Mandrosini for the Rutgers touchdown. Touchdown. Lumberjacks win.
Off the upright and out.
That would be called the triple doink.
And there it is, the ball game. He didn't get there. No, they say he did. Indiana wins.
You don't get explanation. They run off the field.
Spins and gets to the end zone.
I think I'm better in all aspects.
Oh my gosh, this doesn't happen.
Syracuse has played Clemson as well as anybody in the country.
We did win the game, I think. Am I in the right spot?
That time is starting to come. Glad to have you with us on College Football Playoff Top 25. I'm Reese Davis, pleased to be joined by my friends and colleagues, Kirk Herbstreit and David Pollack. Also with us, Joey Galloway and Jesse Palmer. All right, guys, we've got a month basically until the rankings come out, but let's look at what the AP rankings look like. The AP poll brought to you by PlayStation 5, Clemson and Alabama, the only two receiving votes in first place category. Ohio State, after beating Nebraska, has moved up to number 3. Notre Dame 4, Georgia, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, sitting there through 7. And Texas A&M has only lost to Alabama. Wisconsin, now with its quarterback issues, and Graham Mertz tested positive for the coronavirus after an outstanding performance against Illinois. And then Florida, with COVID issues of its own, haven't practiced for 2 weeks. The Gators come back against Missouri this week, and Dan Mullen's team still holding in that 10th spot. So this is what our analysts think, our four guys, what they think the top 6 look like. There's a lot of uniformity, except for Mr. Galloway. He is the lone member of this panel who does not yet have Ohio State in the top 4. So everybody agrees at the top pretty much, Joey, with the exception of where you have Ohio State. Why don't you have the Buckeyes in the top 3 or 4 yet?
Reese, we've been at this for seems like 25 years. We're 5 or 6 years we've been doing this show together, this same crew. And I think there are two things that have always hold true. I don't react as quickly to wins, losses, bad games, good games. It usually takes me a little bit of time, a few games, to react to a team. And because Ohio State's only played one game, and because I came out of that game with more questions than I did going in. Running game didn't look great. Defense didn't look great at times during that game. And so I just wasn't in a hurry to jump them above teams like Notre Dame or Georgia, who I've seen play 5 or 6 games. And so the other thing that we absolutely know to be true, Reese, and I know you agree with me, I'm always right when we have these disagreements. And so in this situation, once I'm right, these guys are wrong, and they'll come around to my page eventually.
You know what? I don't agree with you, Joey, here, but I'm going to say I think it's very logical and very fair, and it's also very consistent with how you've evaluated teams over the years. So you have one game. Ohio State's going to have an opportunity to improve and certainly to move up. I think it's a very reasonable position to take, So, With that in mind, let's look at some notable dates coming up for the college football playoff. I'm not sure everybody agreed with that, but we'll have time to get into it. November 24th, with the delayed start for the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the rankings pushed back to November 24th. That will be the first time the selection committee unveils their choices. Selection day is now December 20th. That's when we'll find out who will play in the semifinal games. In the semifinals this year, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and then the national championship game from Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. That will be on January 11th. By the way, that's the perfect amount of time, in my judgment, between the semis and the championship game. You got 10 days in between. Wish we could make that happen every year. Selection committee looks like this. Some of the notable people, 13 individuals in all. That's not different from past years. Iowa Athletic Director Gary Barta is the chair, along with several other athletic directors. You got plenty of football expertise in there. Ronnie Lott, R.C. Slocum, former Penn State lineman and a mathematician who can probably break down the analytics better than anybody, John Urschel, also in there, along with Todd Stansberry, Scott Strickland, and others. So this is what the committee room is going to look like. Now, it's a little tough to tell from this camera angle, but I promise you it's all socially distanced. The plan at the moment is for them to be able to meet in this fashion and evaluate the teams and bring out their rankings exclusively on our show every Tuesday night starting on November 24th. But Kirk, as I mentioned at the top, I think the top three, even I totally respect where Joey's coming from on it, but the top three teams, when all things considered, look to be pretty easy if we were to get to the end of the line. But with conference-only schedules, teams not playing the same number of games, potentially teams having a really reduced number of games, what's the best way to evaluate these teams in this pandemic era?
Well, two things hold true even in a pandemic. Galloway's got ridiculous takes, and Pollock still can't figure out how to get his backdrop figured out. So we just keep plowing through with these 4 weeks of pre-selection shows. So Dave, we'll clean you up by the time. When's that first show count when they come on and give us the real rankings? 24th.
Yeah, 24th.
By November 24th.
Still got a couple weeks.
I told Pollock earlier. I
right
said,
around
if you need
Thanksgiving,
help,
kid. Let's clean him up. Yeah, exactly. By Thanksgiving, clean up the look. All right, let's go. I get what Joey's saying. He likes to be a contrarian on this show on Tuesday night. He likes to look. Ohio State was his team last year. Right at the finish line, he put them where he thought they should be. I guess I'm looking at Notre Dame, and I know they had a good game against Pitt, but I'm just not quite all there with Notre Dame. Georgia, you could make a strong case for, even with their one loss. Ohio State, Joey, you're right. I mean, we're so used to J.K. Dobbins or Zeke Elliott being in that backfield. One game, but you didn't quite see that same twitch or that big play ability, David, that we've seen in the past. And their defensive line, think about who they've lost over the last, 5 or 6 years. Difference makers. And, again, one game in, I'm sure they're back to the drawing board to try to play better against Penn State. So, but I think Ohio State's potential is still worthy of putting them there at the top three.
Well, listen, if you're going to win a national title, if you're going to show up and be consistent, you better have the trigger man. So you better have an elite offense. You better have an offense that you go, man, they can score 30 or 40, because you're going to have to do that in the playoffs when you face good teams. So I want to see balance from teams. I want to see who you beat. I used to consider, and this is one thing I think, Reese, that will change big time this year, is I used to consider on the road being the hardest thing to do in college football. So I think that's something that's going to be negated this year without crowds, and it'll be something interesting to watch. But you have to have the ability to score points if you're going to go against Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields, these elite offenses. So I'm going to continue to look at that as these teams get measured close, and all the defenses are really good. The offenses are good. Special teams are good. Jesse, you got to have an elite quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why my top three looks the way it does, because of the quarterbacks playing on those teams. But guys, I think in the big picture for the committee this year, we always talk about the two real defining factors in deciding who the best 4 teams are. The eye test, who's the best team based on what you see on film, versus who's the most deserving. Through this pandemic, I think this year more than any other year, I think a lot of the weight really has to go with the eye test. These football experts, these athletic directors, former coaches watching the games and trying to make those decisions because of the pandemic. Reese mentioned it. We don't see a lot of non-conference games early this year, not a lot of conference opponents. There's not a lot of points of comparison that we get with teams in different conferences. I don't think you can give the same value this year to a road win as you would in previous years, especially when there's no fans in the stands or stadiums are just at 25% capacity. It's not always going to be apples to apples this year. Some teams will play 10, 11, 12 games. Based in the Pac-12, if a couple games get canceled or postponed, you could have an undefeated team at the end of the year that only plays, let's just say, 6 games. So I really think, Joey, deciding on the eye test and who's the most dominant, who are the most complete teams, I think that really helps the committee this year determine who the best 4 teams are at the end of the day.
And I truly believe that